Morning all. Like a lot of people over the next few days, I expect, suffering from a bit of a lack of sleep due to doom scrolling. What happened? There were always pointless, objections to Biden and Harris's win in the recent US elections. And that probably should have been the end of the clown show. But unfortunately, that wasn't as far as it went. A whole bunch of quote-unquote protesters who were pro-Trump ended up storming the Capitol building, which they never should have been able to get inside, especially if you look at the amount of security that was laid out for the BLM protests and so on. Looted, rifled through stuff, did damage, handful of them were shot. It's basically the most incompetent and least adequate coup attempt in history, I think, by turns tragic and comic and ridiculous. I'm breaking my usual rule, by talking about this literally the morning after, before the smoke is really cleared, but I want to have some sort of historical record for myself of these events. There wasn't anything really like YouTube when the 9/11 events happened, and I spent all of that time online in a similar way, talking to people and getting information, watching what was going on, but there's no real record of my reactions or anything. So that's why I'm breaking with my normal rule and talking about this today. I mean, we still don't exactly know all the details of what happened. Things will shake out and become known in the days to come. There's all kinds of wild and stupid stories about what's going on, like crisis actors, whether the police did or didn't let the quote-unquote protesters in, things like that. This is the stuff that will shake out one way or the other in the days to come, and not right now. This is the point where decent people, or those with enough nous to recognise that the jig is up, part ways with Trump. This is the turning point where it's too far, it's too much, it's over the line, where this absurd, ridiculous man goes to being something of a threat, finally. This is the point. This is the point to turn around and say that you no longer support Trump, or if you never supported Trump, but you're more centrist, shall we say, measured, less hysterical than a lot of people. Now is the time to turn around and say no more, to condemn what's happened, what's going on, the way that Trump was inciting it all. This is the point. This is the point where you stop steel manning the Trumpoid position, where you stop steel manning the American right, where you stop making excuses or trying to understand or to at least comprehend motivations and so on, and to be sympathetic towards them. Now, this is the point where you stop doing that. Yeah, the American left, such as it is, does do shit things too. Yep, there's a shit ton of hypocrisy flying in all directions right now. But there is a difference, however slim, between what groups, if you can call them that, like BLM have done, like Antifa have done, and what has been done here. Those other groups generally have protested to try and shift the existing political system to make it more fair, to gain something from the democratic structure that exists, that is in place. Whereas the people today are trying to overturn and usurp the democratic structure and process that's in place, rather than to reform it or to change it. Ironically, many of these people will consider themselves pro-democracy, pro-freedom, pro-law and order, even. And yet here they are trying to storm the Capitol in order to force an overturning of a legitimate election, with the complicity of politicians inside who thought, as many have in the past, that they could surf this populist wave, that they could get by without objecting. Ted Cruz in particular stands out. And now is the time to part company with all of that, to part company with them, to condemn them, even if just out of political opportunism. Now is the time. Watching my social media feeds, I realise that for all my efforts to bridge the gap, and there's many others to bridge the gap, there is no real shared reality between the two combatant sides, I suppose you could call it. Most people on either side are so utterly locked in to their own little echo chamber, have been so intolerant of each other, that they haven't communicated or shared any common ground in years at this point, longer than Trump has been around. And groups that are cut off tend to trend to the extreme. This is a well-known psychological phenomenon that drives groups like suicide bombers. If you get people that all agree, they tend to cluster around the most extreme view. So in these bubbles of people who have cut themselves off or who have been cut off from others, it's really entirely predictable that views would get more extreme and more disjointed from reality. And this is true of both extremes. But there's not much room left between those extremes. E-shunning hasn't been helpful. It's helped drive a lot of this. I'm now contributing to this problem because people are just at the point where I can no longer really just forgive or try to understand. Yeah, at this point it is too far, too much. And I've had to start blocking people who I have otherwise wanted to try and be a little Jiminy Cricket for, because they've just doubled down again. Otherwise, recently sane people going on about crisis actors and all the usual stuff. They just doubled down again when they should be pulling back at this point. And yeah, this is the point. This is the time. Yeah, I've tried for years now to humanize the left in the eyes of a lot of these people. To be a bridge, a friend. I can't do it anymore for a lot of these people. And ultimately, whatever the provocation, real or imagined, the ones who bear the responsibility for this are those on Trump's side in all this. To understand a thing is not to condone a thing. And I think I understand the process of how we got here, and that is why I have spent so much of the last few years criticizing the left, agitating for free expression, free exchange of views. But it's now at that tipping point. The threat is no longer those people who are making the situation worse through silencing, censorship, outright condemnation, overuse of words like racism, and so on. At this point, it's Trump. And Trump's Twitter account has been locked down. The way by which he has communicated with his followers. Was that a good idea? Probably just going to make things worse. Probably that will be seen as outrageous and as censorship of the president's free speech. But at the same time, he has been provoking things. You can understand why people would feel that censoring him is now justified after what's happened. But it will just throw more heat into the system and make things worse. Someone's making a calculation. I don't think it's the calculation I would make, but it's an understandable calculation. it was probably optimistic to think that the handful of people who have seen this coming and seen the way in which the quote-unquote left has acted was feeding into this. It was probably egotistical to think that we could make any difference. King Canute trying to turn back the tide. But like I said, this is a tipping point. And it's absurd, and it's stupid, and it's ridiculous. And while there are Nazis amongst the group, Trumpism isn't Nazism, it isn't fascism. Trump doesn't have an ideology, and that is why I think such a diverse alliance of losers can weld themselves to his cause. Trump's ideology is Trump. That's it. Ego, narcissism. Now's the time to turn your back on it. Oh, and if you're trying to wed Gamergate to this, get the fuck out, you disingenuous hack. If there is blame associated with Gamergate to be doled out to anyone, it's the people who helped destroy trust in media